Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started, everyone. Welcome and thank you so much for joining us today. Good afternoon. My name is Rose Warden and I'm a program manager with Interaction, a global NGO network that's headquartered in Washington, D.C., and one of the coordinators of the C7 Human Mobility Working Group. Today, in 90 minutes, we have quite an agenda set out. We will begin with a very large topic and a broad overview of many of the systemic challenges related to migration and climate change, looking at environmental systems, the policy landscape that we work within, and then zooming in to try and identify some key strategies and opportunities for advocacy to really be able to improve the policies for people on the move who are climate vulnerable and that touch on from everything from climate adaptation to how we welcome people. As you may be familiar, migration is not a new phenomenon. People have been moving across the planet since the beginning of human history. What is new are some of the contemporary challenges that they face in doing so. These include not only climate impacts, which in 2022 alone forced 30 million people to move within their borders due to floods, droughts, and slow onset, and storms, rather. It also includes hard national borders, xenophobia, and many of the other challenges that we've been discussing already today in terms of the poly crisis. So we do have a lot of work to do, but we know that migration is also a dynamic and positive force. And that is the force that we need to harness and that we need to change the narrative for everyone to be able to understand, for policymakers to embrace. And that is the task that we have at hand. Luckily, we have tools to help guide us in that direction. We have global compacts on migration and refugees. We have the UNFCCC process. And we as global society are more connected than ever before. And platforms like this one, we have a voice and we need to collectively find the best ways to use it. So I would now like to introduce our panelists who all are coming with vast experience in the fields of migration, humanitarian response, climate adaptation, and advocacy to help guide us through how we can begin to do some of this work more effectively and to give us a real overview of the challenges in a way that can help us to pinpoint what all of our sort of value add is as civil society and some key actions that we can take. So first, Sylvie Wobbs, to my right, is an agronomist with 30 years of experience from the University of Louvain-la-Neuve in Belgium. She has experience in development, humanitarian climate, and environmental management. At FAO, she supports strategic positioning on multiple risks and impacts, including forced displacement, and has been instrumental in integrating emergency and resilience practices into agriculture and food-based livelihood systems, particularly in regions facing food crises. Next, Paula Benea, Head of Programming at IOM's Coordination Office for the Mediterranean. Paula has a rich background in project development, policy dialogue, research, and data with a specific focus on the Mediterranean and Africa. And she has been with IOM since 2011, where she has played a crucial role in integrating migration, climate change, and food security into their programs. Joining us from the Migrant Forum in Asia is its coordinator, William Goes, who offers a regional perspective on migration issues. William has been at the forefront of international advocacy, including for migrant workers and others, and in efforts to engage and influence multilateral processes to promote rights-based migration and development. And then we also have Dr. Bamba Lassine from Côte d'Ivoire, representing AVSI. Dr. Lassine holds a PhD in economic sociology and has over 15 years of experience in humanitarian work. His current role involves spearheading initiatives that support vulnerable communities, including returnees, integrating them back into society through education and employment. Finally, we are honored to have Rabeb Aloui, a passionate climate advocate and the contact point of the Youngo Climate Migration Group. Working group, Rabeb's commitment to environmental justice has driven her to advocate for the rights and empowerment of individuals displaced by climate change. Her work focuses on influencing global policies and enhancing the inclusion of youth perspectives in climate migration dialogues. So without further ado, let's begin our discussion. I will first turn to Sylvie Wobbs to set the scene for us. Sylvie, if I may, what is an agronomist? And more importantly, with your diverse portfolio of work, you certainly understand and are very familiar with the relationships between agri-food systems, migration pressures, forced displacement, and climate change. Please set the scene for us in terms of the climate change landscape, changes that you've witnessed in your time working on these issues, and what are the impacts on human mobility and related program and policy responses?
Thank you, Rose. Good afternoon, hello to everyone. It's an honor and a pleasure to be together today to discuss this very central issue of the climate crisis, migration crisis, and the food crisis, just to name a few of the crises that we are hearing today. There's many more we can allude to. We just had the launch of the Global Report on Food Crisis, which is produced every year for the UN Security Council, and is produced by a series of partners and actors together with the Secretariat here in FAO on the Global Network Against Food Crisis. And the situation is not looking good. Just looking at the food security, acute food insecurity situation, the number of people facing a severe food insecurity is on the rise. We have more than 282 million people in food insecurity across 59 countries and territories, what we call food crisis. This is quite dramatic and including some extreme situations, as we know, in Sudan and Gaza, where urgent action is needed to avert famine. So it's not only the total number of people in food insecurity that's been increasing, it's also the severity, the gravity of people in facing such a severe situation. There are three main, the report is producing, based on the comprehensive data analysis, three main drivers of this food crisis. One, the dominant factor is conflict. The other one is climate extreme events, which are driven by climate change. And the third one is the socio-economic disturbances. In this fragile, protracted situation affected by conflict, these three drivers, these three factors all collide interconnected together. They're driving people in more and more difficult livelihood situation. In these countries, we have to remember, nearly 70 to 80% of the population lives from agri-food livelihoods. That means their lives, their well-being, their income, their food depend on crops, livestock, fish, trees, and other renewable natural resources. So, coming to climate change, we must, and we know, all of us, we feel what's happening. Just even wherever we are on the planet, we can feel the climate is changing. But these consequences, these impacts are even more severe in these fragile countries where insecurity is chronic, where natural resources, ecosystems are already degraded, affected by land erosion and water scarcity, so livelihoods are even more difficult to sustain. So the trend is quite shocking, because we had like 100 extreme events, that means drought, flood, storms, in the 1970s. And today, 20 years later or more, over the past, around the the past 20 years, we've looked at now, we have at least more than 400 extreme events on an annual basis. So the impacts, the consequences from a change in climate, just looking at shocks, is increasing and is meant to increase more because we are going to a warmer and warmer planet. With this situation, we've heard about El Niño, which is also driving and accentuated the impacts from these climate extreme events. And the situation is, of course, driving displacements. There are areas where it is untenable to have your livelihoods. You cannot even convert your cattle from cows to camels. There are some areas where in the Sahara Desert, the temperature is so hot, with more than 50 degrees, the increase in temperature is higher than what we have here in Europe, for example. So there are some limits to adaptation. And mobility and movement must be understood as a climate change adaptation and resilience strategies. But when it's combined together with conflicts and other socio-economic disturbance, then it becomes even more complicated. So what we're trying to do in FAO, together with our partners, our resource partners, but also many of civil society implementation partners, as we're trying to address forced displacement, impact from disasters, risks of climate extreme events, tension between local communities to access resources, pasture, water, land. We are trying to take a multi-risk, multi-actor and sort of system approach. System, when we talk about agri-food systems, it means from production of food to the consumption of food, where very often smallholders are producing food, but also consuming their own food they produce when they can. Because often in situation of crisis, this is the first thing you cut down, is the number of your meal per day. So what we're really focusing in my office, in the Emergency and Resilience Office for FAO, which is a transversal office, is we're really looking at focusing on supporting what we call these food crisis situations, where people's livelihoods on agriculture and food are really completely dependent on the reliable weather. So for example, in the Horn of Africa, with situation like more than 3 consecutive years of drought, even more, it means that the situation is very, very difficult, and the support must be looking, or we are considering, so it's not only emergency support, responding to emergency needs of people, but also trying to tackle some of the underlying risks and causes of vulnerability and difficult to adapt to the changing situation. So having both this immediate and longer term approach is absolutely essential for addressing the climate crisis, mobility, forced displacement, also conflict and food insecurity. So considering emergency agriculture assistance is one of the prerequisites. So it's not only focusing on life support, but livelihood support. So we really strongly advocate for that. If you're supporting people where they are with agriculture, safety nets, with inputs, with feed for the cattle, so that then cattle can still be lactating females to feed the children, you're supporting people to stay. You prevent negative coping strategies which can be forced displacement. So this is some of the example that we do in the Horn of Africa. And what we're trying to really advocate and play together is the linkages between food insecurity, climate change, conflict, and displacement. And trying to, of course, having a joint portfolio of solutions that connects our actions together so that we have a convergence of efforts and we don't talk about durable solution just because of migration displacement, climate change adaptation just because we are the climate arena, humanitarian response because this is just emergency response. We need to craft and agree on this joined up collective solutions that brings our effort at scale to tackle the multiple crises that we are facing. Putting people and those small holders at the center and the leadership into the solution because they know what to do. I'll stop here. I think my time is up. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvie. That did indeed set the scene for us. Very, very important to be thinking about all these linkages, and the complexity at hand is really so great. Moving along, I'd like to turn to Paula next and to even continue on some of these threads of the idea of migration as an adaptation strategy. How is IOM approaching this, and also dealing with many of the distinct protection challenges that come from this type of migration? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Happy to be here. I think Sylvie very nicely set the setting for the discussion, and I won't get into the food security, insecurity drivers of migration, human mobility. I will concentrate on what IOM does to address climate change and risks and the interplay between climate change, food security, displacement, and migration. Climate change and environment has been at the center of migration and IOM's efforts since decades now. In 2021, IOM developed its, actually formalized its strategy on migration, environment, and climate change for 10 years, so 2021, 2023. And it is along three lines. As Sylvie mentioned, we work to develop solutions for people to move. So managing migration in the context of climate change, environmental degradation, disasters due to natural hazards. So that is also part of our efforts to promote regular migration pathways for people who need to move because they can't remain any longer in the territories affected by climate change and environmental degradation. We develop solutions for people on the move. We assist and protect migrants and displaced persons in the context of climate change, environmental degradation, and disaster due to natural hazards. And we develop solutions for people to stay. We make migration a choice by building resilience and addressing the adverse climatic and environmental drivers that compel people to move. And in all these three efforts, we work closely with governments, with partner agencies, with the civil society, and with migrants and the diaspora. They are our key partners in promoting migration as an adaptation strategy to climate change. We've recently, our Director General, our new Director General, has recently published the IOM's new strategic plan for 2024-2028. Climate change is one of the three priorities, and actually is a cross-cutting area, is an enabler of promoting our priorities along three key actions, which is promoting regular migration pathways, saving lives, and providing solutions to displacement. There's a lot that I could say. We've recently also launched, you might have heard, the World Migration Report was launched. There's a whole chapter dedicated to nexus between climate change, food security, and human mobility, exploring in depth the interlinkages, evidence, and actions to take on this nexus. In the region, because I represent the IOM's Coordination Office for the Mediterranean, so our focus is in the Mediterranean, and priority countries in Africa. And when I say priority, is because we promote the Italian government's engagement in the migration management in the Mediterranean and priority countries in Africa. Climate change is a cross-cutting area, both in our actions to manage migration, which is addressing irregular migration, preventing irregular migration, combating trafficking and smuggling of migrants. Climate change is also is an integral element of our action to support cooperation and development, the link between migration and development. And climate change is also an integral element of our work on promoting safe and regular migration pathways. You might have heard there is quite an effort now between Europe and countries in Africa and especially North Africa to promote regular migration pathways towards Europe. We make sure that the climate change perspective is mainstreamed in our efforts to support the governments to promote regular migration pathways, but also in government's efforts and our efforts together with the government and other partners to address the climate drivers of migration. That is a work that we do jointly with our partners such as FAO, WFP, ILO, and others. So just to give you a glimpse of the migration management strategy of IOM with regards to addressing climate change challenges. I think I'll stop here, and then I'm happy to also provide spontaneous responses to the comments from the room. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. Very interesting to hear about all of the diverse work that IOM is doing. It sounds like the portfolio is really extremely broad in terms of the different ways that you work on these issues. I'd now like to turn to William. Hello, William. We are so glad you're able to join us today. Building on Paula's insights on migration management, we'd like to now turn to the Asian context and what challenges are the communities that you're working with facing? From their perspective, what are you seeing?
Thanks, Rose, and thanks, Sylvia and Paula, for setting the tone for a discussion like this, which I think is important for us in civil society to do. I'm still struggling with the message of civil society, which we called on for government this morning, for a new vision. The exact words were a new vision for migration and a long-term perspective kind of thing. And I honestly believe we can't put it to governments anymore, because it will have to be something that comes from the ground up, from civil society. I don't think governments have the capacity for a new vision on migration. If you look at the history of state engagement on migration in the last few years kind of thing. Let me give you one example now. The World Migration Report of the IOM was launched in Bangladesh for the first time ever. For the first time ever, the World Migration Report 2024 was launched in Bangladesh about 2-3 weeks ago. You know, Bangladesh, and I'm sure by the time, if you're here in Rome for a day, you surely must have bumped into at least one Bangladeshi, for sure. If you go on the streets, you will see the hop-on, hop-off buses, the guys with the red kind of half jacket, all of them are Bangladeshis, at least the most that I met were Bangladeshis. If you still don't know who I'm talking about, go to the city center, the train station. And as you get off on the side, you have the whole Asian community there, Asian and African community. My friend, of course, from civil society here, yesterday asked me, when we met, he said, William, you want to see monuments or people? I said, people. And then he said, come, I'll take you to the Asian Quarter. No tourist takes you to an Asian Quarter. No, to what are those guides, tourist guides. They don't talk of Asian Quarter. But there is an Asian quarter in Rome, and that is next to the train station, which is now, he said, becoming also an African quarter. And you will know why. You will see that there is almost a whole 2, 3 streets in which you will not see a European really. In those 2, 3 streets, you'll just see Asians. And I think this is important to understand. Bangladesh is one of the 6th countries, that is country of origin, largest country of origin at the moment. Its population is 171 million. Last year, 2023, last year, 2023, we saw 1.3 million Bangladeshis leave the country for jobs overseas. That's Bangladeshis who went through the regular process that the state of country of Bangladesh has. Philippines, another country of origin, and you see a lot of the Filipinos in the churches in Rome, if you want to know who I'm talking about. Philippines in 2023 had the highest deployment since the last 50 years. And if you know anything about the Philippine history of migration, when it started in the 70s, the dictator Marcos had then said it will only be a 5-year project because the economy was going down. And Ferdinand Marcos said, we need to go out to get some remittances to build the economy. But it's going to be a 5-year thing. And then after that, it will be left up to people whether they want to go or not, by choice kind of thing. We are now in the 50th year. And in 2023, we had the highest deployment of the last 50 years. Every country of origin in our region, in the Asia region, and more so now growing in the Africa region as well, every country of origin is putting migration as a development strategy for various reasons. While you spoke about climate and having its effect on food security, in the 70s it started largely because in the 70s and 80s because of trade policies that were set by the WTO and by the GATT agreement, which literally led to the collapse of the agricultural industry in the developing world. So it's not an issue that is new. It's an issue that has a history that forces people to move because their livelihoods have been destroyed. So since the 70s, it's not as if climate is a new thing that has come out. Climate is only aggravating it even further. And we are going to see this. We are going to see this. We in Asia, our biggest region of deployment has been the Gulf states. Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, and the 6 Gulf countries, oil-rich countries. That has been the biggest area of deployment. But now, and post-COVID, because of the huge debt taken by countries of origin, because of the vaccine and the inequitable distribution of the vaccine to the developing world, huge debts had to be taken. And because those debts now have to be repaid, countries of origin have gone on a fast tracking of deployment. The former secretary of the Philippines, when she took on her post, she said she's going to fast track deployment. Largely because remittances is one way of guaranteeing what FDI and ODA do not give. So that collaboration and cooperation that we talk of C7, G20 and things like that, that is not there today in the way it needs to be to help people have that choice to stay and not to move. And I think it's important for us as civil society to understand that, not to get caught up in the media message or the government message that is put out there of we need to protect our cultures, we need to protect our economy, we need to protect our shores. As civil society, we have to be able to go into the deeper understanding, much deeper than governments, about why people are moving. and what are some of these root causes and what we need to be doing, because we have seen in our region, and again coming back to Bangladesh, because of climate change, the whole river delta system in which people rely on small scale agriculture, but because of the salination of when the salt water comes into the rivers, because of that people have had to leave. And yes, there is not enough data of mass movement, right? But we see it as the desire for it in the country of origin because there is no other hope. Bangladesh is one of the most densely populated countries in the world. You can't move any more inland anymore. And so you've got to be able to find somewhere outside to go. And I think that is a conversation that we have to have, which we are not having in governments. We don't have this conversation in the GCM. We don't have the conversation in the GFMD. Governments don't. At least we don't see it because sometimes we are not even allowed into those discussions anymore because of the closing space. But as civil society, as C7, I think civil society will have to start looking at why people are moving. That right to move when you have no other choice. And that is a lesson we have learned in our region, in the Asia region. It's a story of people who have moved and continue to move now in what started as temporary labor migration programs are now permanent cycles of temporary 2-year contracts. Climate change has aggravated that even further, where sometimes if you have extreme weather events, and we have plenty of those in our region, from Bangladesh to the Philippines to even Japan, but I won't put Japan here, but Philippines. When, because of extreme weather events, a migrant worker who went out 15 years ago and then built the home, the family, and things like that, built everything. One extreme weather event wipes everything out. Because the extreme weather events happen in certain geographical kind of areas as well that are prone to these extreme weather events. And so everything can be washed out in any season. And we have seen that. And so people then resort to these temporary kind of cycles which become forever cycles. And it has an impact. It has an impact on the social cost of migration, families, children, livelihoods, cultures being diminished. And people then having to resort to coming to destination countries and then seeing what jobs they can get on the streets in the informal sector. I think we as civil society need to rethink. This new vision has to be something that we create, not governments. And I think it's good to see how as C7 we can start looking at the foundations of at least what this new vision will look at. And definitely it will have to be one that is based on a deep sense of human rights. But more than human rights, I think, I don't know if you can say that, but human dignity. Because it is in how we treat each other and look at each other, we are able to identify our own sense of human dignity. And so I think on the ground that we see this constant countries of, we challenge our countries not to just treat our people as commodities to be shipped overseas. But now that seems to be the only alternative. So when the ambassador today talked about support for development, that has to materialize in a real sense, in a very real sense. Thank you.
Thank you, William. This idea of civil society needing to come together and understand in a more comprehensive way what the drivers are, I think is a really interesting point to take away from this already, in that governments always talk about root causes and things, but as civil society, maybe we can have a little bit of a broader perspective on what that actually means and looks like. So thank you for that. Now I would like to turn to Dr. Lacine. We've set the scene clearly in terms of climate risks, the realities of mobility and displacement. Now I'd like to zoom in even further to a programmatic level to some of the work that you're doing in Côte d'Ivoire with the education system and how, as we've been discussing, all of these systems are actually interrelated. And so how is the education programming that you're working on linking up with all of this, and how are schools also sort of sites of resilience?
Thank you very much. And I'm very honored to attend this event on behalf of AFC. AFC is an international NGO. We have just celebrated our 15 years anniversary 2 years ago, aiming in working at least in 40 countries worldwide, promoting human dignity as well. And we have started working in Ivory Coast, at least 10 years ago. And our first entry in the country was to support the national system to set a protection program in the country. But regarding AFC's working method, which is how to consider the whole system, how to involve the communities, how to take into account the multiple sectors and other elements of the social ecosystem of the communities, we came out that education could be something very relevant in our intervention in the country. And we started with a general support to the ministry, to the government, to set a very relevant educational program at primary level, focusing on contributing to a draft to design the academic curricula for children, training teachers, but as well trying also to support the school environment. We were convinced that what we call enabling environment for school was a necessity if we want to achieve a quality education. And out of these experiences, a couple of years ago, we got funding from donors to set a migration program which was aiming to support the reinsertion of returnee migrants in the country. Most of you may, for example, know that Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, well known, is one of the performing countries in terms of economic growth these years. But in terms of social, let's say, inconvenience, we have some failures. For example, you may see that almost 39% of population remain under the rate of poverty in Côte d'Ivoire. That was the report of the World Bank just for 2023, last year. And within the system, our strategy was consisting in profiling migrants when they return in country, for example. And we are working, we have a great connection with the IOM, International Migrant Office. While migrants return to the countries, they are referred to our integration program. Within this program, we're trying to profile them. What does this consist in? Profile means to know the reason behind the migration, the former migration. And most of one of the key and relevant element that we found out regarding our approach was to see the education and skill background of these returnee migrants. Out of this, we were able to draft some courses for them integrated to the national vocational training system. Since for us as AFC, we used to say that education is beyond instruction. Education is as well how to support people open the world, how to skill within beyond their expectation, for example, how to make them discover some potentialities of the personality. Out of these experiences, we have set a curricular designing program with the National Vocational Training System. What comes out, I will surprise you, is that the former vocational training system in the country was not matching let's say, the level of the migrant, since the system is built around the academic and the general pathway to have some skills. We had to design a specific curricula, training to support these migrants. As William was saying, one fact that came out, and I consider it as a very experience sharing moment, is that most of these education, most of this insertion of returned migrants in the country, not only in the country but somewhere else, are focusing how to support them with income generating activities, etc., economic livelihood building, asset, etc. But how can we achieve a sustainable, for example, access building system? How can we achieve a sustainable micro-enterprise for the migrant? How can we ensure that migrants are matching the requirement and the exigence, français, I don't know, the requirements of how to be a good entrepreneur? So for us, beyond these courses in vocational training, we have set, building on some RFC, psychosocial support training, how to support them with additional courses regarding the personality. And we have one of the relevant modules that RFC is promoting is called the value of life, la valeur de la vie. We say in French, the value of life. You can find this document. Is one of the key strategies around which we used to build this psychosocial support. It's enabled these migrants, as you may know, the first need of a returned migrant when he came back in the country is the shame he have to face regarding his community, within his community. Returning is like a kind of failure that is facing even in his own family. So psychosocial become as a gas to make him rebuild his self-confidence, how to be more open and to be integrated in the program. One of the founding that we as civil society, and I'm very honored to share this experience, is that we have to advocate to the government and tell them, okay, it's true, you have your system, general system, not matching, not being relevant anytime, but you have to revise it, because we as civil society organization, we do have experiences that we can share with you. And within this way, just a little comment, 2 weeks ago, we had a very relevant meeting in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire, to present this model. I'm just telling you about RFC's programming of insertion to a returning migrant. And there we invited the government, the ministries, all the relevant stakeholders on the field to present this model. How to build convenient, relevant skilling program matching the profile to address more the sustainability of the insertion program for the migrants. And we were surprised that the director of the Ministry of Vocational Training, on behalf of the government, applauded for this leadership, as they call it, and this innovative approach, since vocational training and this experience is showing that skilling people even in vulnerability context, is to be something lifelong that can be built in the lifelong of the person. So this is a little experience I wanted to share, but for the question, I can adjust the nexus with the climate change sense, and this can be something, interesting. Regarding the primary education system we are contributing to support in the country, we are almost working in 8,000 rural primary schools of Côte d'Ivoire over 12 years, and we are still working there. We know, for example, how school attendance, maintaining and achieving can be a challenge for the rural children, since because of the climate change, the asset of the family, the lively system of the family in these rural region areas have been very weakened. So that can be something I would love to talk about through the question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Lucine. One thing that's standing out to me now is how we need to have the systems perspective, not only when we're looking very large at the whole environmental and agri-food systems, but also when we come all the way in to educating a single person and thinking about what that means in terms of setting them up for success as they move forward. Okay. I would now like to turn to Rebeb online. I'm going to see if I can make you larger in the room here. Well, okay, here we are. Thank you. Rebeb, we are so thrilled that you're able to join us from Tunisia today and bring a youth advocacy perspective to the global policy landscape here. What are some of the challenges and opportunities that you encounter while advocating for protection and empowerment of people displaced by climate change or migrating due to climate impacts? And could you share some of the specific priorities of the Youngo Migration Working Group and any recent achievements? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rose, for giving me the floor. I'm so glad to be part of your panel today. I would like to start before with some statistics shared by the OEM in 2022. We have around 10 million disaster displacement in East Asia and in the Pacific. We have around 12 million disaster displacement in South Asia. We have 7 million disaster displacement in Sub-Saharan Africa, and we have 0.1 million disaster displacement in the Americas. And let me finish with that. We have 305,000 disaster displacements in the Middle East and in North Africa. To respond to your question, Rose, I think the main challenge is the limited or lack of international recognition and attention regarding the climate migration. For example, you mentioned it already, the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migrations that encourages the government to establish safer migration pathways for those who need to migrate. This is a good step. Important step. However, the compact does not address the adverse effects of climate change, for example. While these frameworks are available for raising awareness and laying the groundwork for safer migration, but they are still limited in terms of action. And I think personally that it's essential to incorporate the impacts of climate change and environmental degradation into these discussions and frameworks. And we as a Youngo Working Group, we call for the states to begin developing safe regional migration pathways. The second, gap, is in the Refugee Convention from the 1951. In this convention, in its current form, is unable to protect climate refugees. For example, this convention grants refugee status only to individuals who are persecuted for specific reasons, such as religion, race, nationality, but at the same time, they exclude climate-related factors in this convention. Also, this convention's definition of refugees involves persecution by a human agent, such as state or non-state actor, which does not apply to climate-induced displacement. And let me finish with that the convention requires that the refugee must be outside their country of residence or unable to return due to the lack of protection from their country. While most climate change displacements occurs internally within a person's own country. There is some gaps and challenges regarding some of the conventions and treaties, but at the same time, I would like to say that there is a step forward, and here I would like to talk about the Australian Tuvalu Union Treaty that was adopted in November 2023. This treaty represents a step forward in the protection of climate refugees, but at the same time, as I said, there is limited international tension regarding the climate migration issue, and especially when we talk about climate negotiations. And let me, for example, give the example of UNFCCC negotiations. When we talk about adaptation, we should talk about climate migration. When we talk about loss and damage, we should talk about climate migration too. The second challenge, I would say that the policies within the countries, different countries have variety of policies regarding climate migrants, leading to a kind of inconsistent protection and support. And the third challenge is the financial constraints. We don't have enough funding for climate migrants. For the opportunities, I think we need to take advantage of the advancement in technology and the rise of AI. Why not? AI or this technology can help, for example, to improve or to track or to forecast and response strategies for climate displacement. And one of the challenges I would like to add also, sorry, the lack of information and data regarding climate migrants. So as an opportunity, we can take in consideration the advancement in technology and the data analytics that can improve this tracking and forecasting for climate displacements. For us as a young working group today, we are working to raise the voices of climate migrants. We are working to raise a global call for action to advocate for climate migration space and policy to build resilience. Also, we work to implement Kampala Convention in practice, including through provisions in domestic law. For those who are not familiar with the Kampala Convention, it's the African Union Convention for the protection and assistance of internally displaced persons in Africa. As a young working group, we are working to provide a safe place platform for knowledge, for storytelling, in copying mechanism from in frontline communities and refugees and climate migrants affected by climate change induced disasters. So this is what we are globally working on now. We are working on storytelling, we are working to change the policies, why not? And we are also working to collect data and information regarding climate migrants. And this is globally what we are working on now. Thank you, Rose.
Thank you, Rabeb. All right, so we are running slightly short on time, but I would like to now ask everyone a lightning round of questions. So as we move into the final segment, we've already been getting into some of the practical aspects of our topic here, which is great. And continuing on that, in 2 minutes, I'd like to ask each of you, what is missing from this discussion so far? Is there a particular element that you would like to highlight? And Sylvie, I'll start with you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Rose. I think there's been very, very important elements already flagged. So your question is difficult, but trying to put some of these elements together and looking at the increasing food insecurity and these numbers of countries and territories which we call food crises affected by climate, by conflict, by other socioeconomic shocks. Knowing the global crisis that we're facing, climate, biodiversity, pollution, water, land degradation, all these cascading of crises, the central role of smallholders for the agri-food systems and their livelihoods. This needs more of attention and investments. And here I want to praise and thank the civil society for the good work, especially in these complex, fragile countries, where people really rely a lot on your support. So what I would like to flag is the looking at human mobility as a climate adaptation and resilience strategies, for this to be recognized, especially in areas which are becoming very hard to live. So this should be recognized and not treated in isolation. Let's anchor human mobility as part of the agri-food systems, resilience and adaptation, and consider that really anchor in the livelihoods of the people who have the solutions, who can lead the changes that are needed, but needs to benefit from a suite of interventions that goes from early warning systems, social protection, nature-based solution, emergency response in case of extreme events, resettlement support and packages where both the displaced and the host communities are supported for this agricultural livelihoods. And I'm saying this because today the smallholders, which we're calling really the small fish, food producers, food-dependent livelihoods, they are still supplying the world with food, and then they provide more than 50% of the food supply. So this is a lifeline. And they're also playing a vital role as a custodian of natural resources, renewable natural resources. They are managing these precious ecosystems. But the funding and the investments for these people to have a decent lives where they want, the funding is very low. Investment in this resilient agri-food system, especially climate resilient, is even decreasing according to the latest FAO data. So there is a plea that really we can do overall for this, from the civil society event, is to invest in agri-food livelihoods, especially in these fragile, vulnerable countries, where people really can make a difference in bringing this solution. We need this convergence of actions together. We don't have this today. Thank you.
Thank you, and Paula.
Good. So what is missing in discussion? I think we miss the migrants' perspective in a sense that we speak about migration and the impact climate change has on migration, human mobility. But I think in our responses, when I say our, I refer to the international community, we need to mainstream better the migrants' perspective, their voice, their stories. So I agree with Rabab. We need to bring migrants at the center of our policy discussions, at the center of discussions for local national adaptation plans to climate change. And when I say migrants, I also look at diaspora. Diasporas have a key role in promoting solutions to global challenges, including to climate change. Because they have the knowledge, they know the stories of their countries of origin, they know the challenges, they have the skills, and they can promote both local communities empowerment or skills transfer. They can finance responses. They are mobilizers. Italy, for example, has made a lot of advancements in recognize the key role of diasporas in policy, cooperation development, but also climate change and health and other areas. They've launched the National Diaspora Forum, so they are a key partner at the table with the government in promoting solutions. So we have lots of trust in our diaspora associations. Something else that is missing is probably many of you have mentioned about the lack of data. And here's a good news is that IOM, together with many other partners, I'm not saying that IOM is the only one promoting data, but probably is one of those actors who, because of their presence, huge presence on the field, we have over 400 offices, and our presence in working closely with the beneficiaries, we have a wide range of data that tells the vulnerability of migrants, that tells the impact climate change has on migrants or a local community, that tells the story about envisaged intentions to migrate, so forecasting, that is very important. So I think we need to work together and to complement our data on the impact climate change has on migration and human mobility in general, and how we can use that data then to inform our policy making, policy responses. That's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you. To move us forward more quickly due to time constraints, I'm going to switch up the rules one more time as moderator and give the rest of you a choice between answering either the what is missing question or where should we be focusing our collective efforts on human mobility to tackle the climate crisis over the next 1 to 5 years and why. You can answer either one. Thank you.
All right. Very quickly. The Human Development Report, the latest one, spoke of the increasing inequalities, the polarizing world that we are seeing today. And I think that is an indicator for us to see that the challenge of migration is going to be right at the center of that. People move because of the inequalities that they experience. I think what is missing is the perspective of the South. I think it is important to get that perspective into the room. I think when developed countries and countries of destination talk about migrants, they talk about what we must do for them. No country of destination is courageous enough to say, we need them. No country of destination is courageous enough to say that. Even after there was a whole discourse about essential workers during COVID and about beating of pants and things like that for the nurses, the drivers, the Grab drivers, the platform gig workers, the supply chain agricultural workers. There was a lot of appreciation of them for 2 years. Today, nobody talks about the essential worker. So it's time that means we just started being true to ourselves and to the discourse that we want to have. And that's why I'm saying I think it has to come from the ground up, and it has to come from civil society and migrants and communities.
Thank you. Dr. Lassine?
Yeah, I will summary focus should be put, this is what comes from our experiences, how to replace the human capital building within the programming at national, regional, and local side. This is something that I want to stress. Here, I would love that government and even we as civil society, we're trying to involve the local communities in designing and implementing activities aiming at supporting them. But before, I think that if we want to achieve a sustainable nexus between climate migration and from our side, as well education as central key, we have to be aware of the reason behind why people are moving. In some rural villages where we, as AFSI, we are working in the north part of the country. In the north part of the country, I was mentioning 800 villages where we are facing the lack of rain, facing the hardest livestock, the livelihood and the assets of the families has weakened over the years. The consequence, the immediate consequence is that you're going to find some many dropout children because of the lack of resources of the family in the villages. They are getting dropped out of school, but lack of assets is, let's say, is due mainly to the effect of the climate change, which is worsening the living condition of the families. So, one of the missing gap is, instead of considering education or training, skilling as an activity which should be implemented during or at the end or during the pathway of the program, why not set in education at the beginning in a preventive way? Because the children of this 2024 will be the adults of tomorrow, and if they are more skilled how to manage climate, how to have better and strong competencies, aptitude, knowledge, I think that most of them will have skills how to have a good behavior in the future. In Côte d'Ivoire, if you take just a little rate of people which are going to the migration, most of them are likely to say, I'm going to migration because of lack of job, lack of work, because my revenue are not capable to support my basic needs. Why his revenue is that not capable to support his basic need? Because there's some gaps in terms of skilling. And Sylvie was stressing about investing, but we have to try to find what investing means. Does that only mean giving fund, providing fund, providing? No, investing, this is, investing here has to be considered as something integrated. How, while we are investing in material, financial, we should as well invest in people in terms of skilling to make them more aware of some constraints to address. Within the system, the expected role, I was mentioning national, regional, even worldwide, the model to address here, if we want to have something valuable, I think, is to reinforce the partnership between the private sectors, the public, and we as civil society, because we are on field. We are in contact, daily contact with the beneficiaries. So our voice are the most relevant to have something very clear and very concrete. I think this is something I wanted to highlight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Rabeb, in 20 seconds, please.
It's so hard, Rose, but thank you. So, what is lacking? First of all, I think we don't talk about the mental health of climate migrants, and especially children and youth. For example, according to UNICEF, more than 50 million children have been forced displacement due to climate change issue, and these children are facing trauma, anxiety, depression, and we don't talk enough about the mental health of the climate migrants, especially children and youth. The second, I would say, issue that we don't talk about enough is the disinformation. We don't talk enough about the disinformation regarding climate migrants today. They are not only facing the impact of climate change, and at the same time, they are not enough recognized. And unfortunately, we are witnessing a lot of disinformation regarding climate migrants and climate change in general. But climate migrants, especially, are facing a lot of disinformation. And I'm talking about that from my own experience as Tunisians. I'm witnessing that a lot of migrants who came in Tunisia, for example, they are subject to so much information and misinformation. Unfortunately, hope it wasn't 20 seconds, right?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Rabab.
Thank you,
And
Rose.
yeah, absolutely. And now I would really love to turn to those in the room and those online as well for questions. So it looks like we have one in the back already, and then over here, and then right here. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is John Paul Ngueya. I'm from Paris in France. I'm in charge of of screening HIV tests for immigrants from sub-Saharan African, and also in the Asylum Seeker Center in Paris. So my congratulations to all of you, because the responsibility of immigration depends of each our role here. So Sylvie, you try to let us know about the link, the difference between crisis, food crisis, climate change, and it's different for what Bamba is trying to do in his country. Bamba is trying to save life of those youth who want just to move to go to the north because they don't have a possibility for their life. So she is trying to give them some background so that the government should help those people when they will have the background to get some work in their country. And William said that when we move, it's not only for war. Because when you ask someone, why are you moved to your country, Afghanistan, Pakistan? That is a question that I'm asked to many of them. They don't say that it's only war. No, there is so many reasons. And that is those reasons that William was saying now. So all those things need to take in account by our government. If the government don't take all those examples in account, all the work of the civil society will be down. There is a difference between a person who works in the office and the person who works in the field. There is a difference. You work in the office, you don't know what's happened on the field. I'm working on the field, I know what's happened. So if I carry all those demands on the field, I should try to let you know that this is the problem of the immigration. And immigration is illegal immigration, and who is a danger for our country. And there is legal immigration, who is a lucky of another country. So next time, please, the organizer need to give more time. So we need to continue this. You see, the time is too short. There's too many people here who have questions, but there's no time. Next time, please, give the summit should be maybe 3 or 4 days.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the, absolutely agree with you. May I go to this, yes, you, ma'am? And then over here, there was a question.
Can I just stand and talk?
I think maybe we need the mic for those online. I'm not sure.
Online.
Yeah, thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the wonderful panel. My name is Ginelwe Lynette Mabota Aide. Very long. So I just wanted to ask a few questions to the various panelists. I do apologize, I won't take too long. And it goes across the board because some of you touched on a lot of these. One thing is that I'm asking myself is what is the role of private sector in all of this, right? Because we're blaming public, we're blaming ourselves as CSOs. What the hell is the private sector doing? That is something that we need to find out. And we don't want to hear this corporate social responsibility nonsense. They need to give us more. Second question, you spoke about, I think it was you, Sylvie, you spoke about the nexus between climate change, food security, and migration. And we're also talking about coming up with a new agenda as a collective. And I'm just wondering to myself, when can we have another space so we can sit and come up with this new agenda? Because at current point, I don't think we will survive, as we all know. Unit Aid has done a lot of work around climate and health. We produced a report, but it's also like work that is moving. But the problem is even the pharmaceutical industry is destroying the climate. I mean, about 40%, 4.5% of everything that we manufacture. So we're also causing that issue. So it'd be really good to have some sort of mechanism. The forecasting, whoever brought that up, it's very difficult to forecast something like this because natural disasters like come out of nowhere. So I'm just asking the colleague on the line, how do we do it in such a way that we are actually making sure that, you know, we're not losing people, because I feel like we will lose a lot of people because it happens so fast when you do have to move because your house is just burned down. Just the last question, I apologize again. And that is just the question around the human resources for health, right? Before COVID, we had a lot of healthcare workers. During COVID, they worked really hard. Post-COVID, everybody forgot about them. Now they have better jobs in Dubai and wherever, but we're complaining that they're taking our people. Meanwhile, we're not taking care of healthcare, our healthcare fraternities. So that's a big thing that we can do as the government, as civil society for the government.
Thank you very much. Actually, sorry, just because we've got a lot of questions so far, do we have any online? Okay. Yep, you're next, thank you. One question, please, thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like just stress about provision of healthcare services, access to healthcare for migrants, because what Paula said that I liked about involvement of migrants, refugees, IDPs itself to decision-making processes, policy-making processes, because I'm a refugee. It was 34 years ago when my family was forcibly expelled where they lived from their homeland, and when we moved from our place to another, my little brother was felt so much, and it was pneumonia. There was no diagnosis, no treatment, even drugs, and there was no international support as well at that time, but it is now 30 years later, it's the same, the situation is the same. The country of destinations of migrants are not provide any healthcare services to migrants. Medical insurance is an issue. They are not provided with any benefits of medical insurance. And as a civil society organization in our country, we conducted situation and economic analysis on migration and HIV services in our country and in some countries in Central Asia. And we found that mainly people are suffering from stigma and discrimination while exploring, while looking for any healthcare services in other countries, and some of other social and economic problems, language barriers, and etc.
Sorry, thank you. I would just, our panelists are going to run out of time to respond if we could.
Okay, thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Okay, we have 8 minutes left. I will open the floor to the panelists, and I'm happy to remind on any of the topics that have come up, but perhaps in the reverse order this time. Let's go reverse order. So Rabeb, please feel free to answer any of the questions that have come up so far. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rose. I would like to react to the last intervention, the lady who shared her own story. Unfortunately, nothing has changed really, and that's why we are advocating for that. We are advocating for more recognition of climate migrants, and that's why I mentioned it, the mental health of climate migrants, not only the health but also the mental health. And I totally agree with you. We need to change policies. We need to change the narratives regarding the climate migrants. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabeb. Dr. Lucine?
Sure. I just wanted to pay a little attention to the role of the enterprises as the private sector she mentioned it. I think that in my speech I talked about how to stress some national but regional approaches to be more in touch with the problem. You will find, for example, in many areas, some enterprises that are working in some areas that maybe some cities, some town, in even one of the example I would mention is that in Côte d'Ivoire you may find some enterprises of cocoa working, for example, in some rural areas. These enterprises, in the way of the social responsibility, for example, are more contributing in supporting the school system, while building school, supporting as well the design of curricula in these areas. So we as civil societies, knowing more the needs of community, we are able to make them address some concrete and some relevant gaps that we are identifying. So the role for me regarding the role of the enterprises is how to advocate for the social reinvestment in the community. And we have some good example in such activity. For example, we have just started a 20 school building renovation and schooling in Côte d'Ivoire with the support of private enterprises. This is a good example. And we were just feeling honored that the 14th April, just the last month, the school have been visited by the Italian President Mattarella in Ivory Coast to see how that was. I was stressing the link between private sector, civil organization as AFC, and the institutional actors, which is the government, while achieving the national goals based on the concrete needs driven by civil organization on how to raise funds from the private sectors. So this trilogy, I think, can be something to promote at some specific level. Thank you.
Thank you very much. William?
Yeah. With regard to private sector, interestingly, private sector gets it, in the sense of private sector gets it, it sees the need for labor mobility, faster labor mobility. But having said that, I am very skeptical as a civil society representative of private sector, largely because our starting point is recruitment and placement agencies that charge migrant workers a huge amount, indebt them to the point that they end up in forced labor situation. So that whole area of private sector needs to be cleaned up. The other area of private sector that needs to be cleaned up, or at least needs to deliver more, is in the situations of access to justice. You know, now in the business and human rights kind of world principles, there's a lot of talk about private sector engagement, but private sector has yet to deliver anything really concretely as private sector. And remember then it's not only the big companies, it's the small and medium companies as well. So that would be important. For the first time, COP28 had health on the agenda. And it would be good to see how we continue to keep that on the agenda of the COP, because it's a big thing in terms of how streets, heat stress, and other issues of climate affect migrant workers or have an impact on migrant workers and members of their families, kind of thing. We in MFA have called for a social protection for all, kind of thing.
Thank you. And now we, in fact, only have 2 of our original 90 minutes remaining. So I would like to just thank everyone in this room and online for attending today, and note that to the gentleman's first original point about needing more time, I'm glad that we have at least another day to spend together to be able to continue the conversation in other forums, and look forward to doing that. So thank you all again so much for coming today, and take care.